It is with great pleasure that I'm here today. I see familiar faces, some I've known for many days, and some I've seen following me for the last two. And I've been trying to make sure that there is some different content each time. I said I sort of give three kinds of presentations. The first kind is sort of the big rejuvenating Baptist preacher. That was Monday. The second is more of an interactive workshop. That was yesterday. And the third is a bit more academic. That is today. But I will do my best not to make it too boring. So, here we go. So why am I here today? Well, why am I even in Italy these days? Italia. And the short answer is I'm here because I need your help. I'm here to recruit you. You know, one of the things that I have been absolutely amazed by as I go through these days is how tightly connected your library community is. You know, I show up and everyone just meets each other and knows each other as if they've seen them for the past 10 years. And it's an amazing network. And it's a network that I think can take us far. Frankly, as I've been speaking to librarians and I've been going through libraries, some of them ancient, some of them very new, I sense a frustration that librarians have about where they want to be but feel that they can't quite get there. It's not an unusual frustration. In the United States, it is a frustration that I'm very familiar with. That there is this sense that we want to do things. We want to reach out to our communities. We want to offer new services. We want to innovate. We want to try new things, but they won't let us. And the other people holding us back, sometimes that's the administration. Sometimes it's library science gray bearded professors. Sometimes it's the government. Sometimes it's a mayor. Sometimes it's their own users of their libraries. And what I found in that frustration is either that frustration can stop you. It can beat you down. It can make it so that every day gets harder and harder and you simply say, I'm done. And I can no longer proceed forward. Can you hear me all right in the back? Okay. But if you use that frustration to find other people who share your frustration, you can begin to build a network. On those bad days, on those days when they stopped you, you can call to someone and say, oh, what a bad day. And they can say, you know what? I had a good day. Share it. And then when they have a bad day, they can share your good day. And then you make your network slightly larger and slightly larger. And multiple countries, and I love the idea of the world in a city and the city in a world. You have with you connections all over the world in this great city, in this great country. And then if you begin to look around, you begin to notice that there are more of you than there are of them. That after a time, you realize that you begin to outnumber those that stopped you. And you begin to realize that that comes with power. That comes with an ability to change. When you were the new librarian hired, now you manage other librarians. And you have an opportunity to do a better job. That you have the ability to engage. I get the sense when I come and people say, oh, we're glad you're here, David. Sometimes I feel like Lenin being called to Moscow, right? We're time for a revolution, come in and help us. Sometimes, using the apt analogy, I feel like the barbarian at the gate, trying to pound through and say what we can be. But I would tell you that I am nothing more than someone who tells stories. I tell the stories of success. I tell the story of libraries and librarians who have made that change. All the lessons that I learn and think about and study are from libraries making things happen. Someone once referred to me, David Lankus is a library futurist. And I said, I am absolutely not a futurist. I am a library currentist, presentist. I want libraries to be better today. I don't have the patience to wait for tomorrow. And so I seek them out. And I found many here on this trip that I will share your stories with others and add to those stories. So I need your help. So let's talk, if I might, about the question, the topic. Because I read the topic last night. My children and my wife are here with me, and they went to Pompeii. So they were gone all day in Pompeii. It was nice. And they came back at 8 o'clock in the Piazza Popolo. And so I took that opportunity to walk through Trastevere and down through the Campo de' Fiori, take a turn into the Piazza Navona, and end up in the Piazza Popolo. I'm sorry, I just massacred your language. But I had like an hour to work on it, so I said, oh, I have my laptop, I'll start working on it. And I reread the title, and originally I was thinking this was about library science education, how we train you, but that's not what the title is. And I don't know if I made up the title or yours, but it's brilliant. Which is looking at how libraries and learning are changing and evolving. And I would like to begin by talking about how our understanding of learning has changed. And I'm going to start in a place that you may not expect. I'm going to start, if things will move, with a bucket. Come si dice bucket?
Secchio.
Secchio. This is how we used to see students. And at the higher education in universities, this is how we still see students. But we used to see students in the 19th century in education theory. The idea was that you are empty buckets, empty vessels, and I, as the expert and the knowing teacher, will throw bricks of knowledge into your bucket. If the misses, your bucket may be a little more small than we would like. Right? Not everyone has the same size bucket. But the idea here is that learning, I was in charge. I was in charge. I had the learning. You were a passive recipient of learning. So here, learn this. Here, know this. Here, this is what happens. And as the professor, as the teacher, as the schoolmaster, I was in charge of knowing the topic. And by God, you couldn't tell me any different. In the United States, we have a phrase. It is called the sage on the stage. We were the smart people who knew it all. You were just waiting for us to inform you. But this is not true. You are not buckets. Congratulations. Right? What we learned is that you are actually in charge of learning. I can try and teach you as hard as I can. I can speak as loudly as you want. I can pound on tables. I can be entertaining. I can be boring. I can use slides and magic shows. But if you don't want to learn, you're not going to learn. You are not a bucket. You're a person. And as such, you are in charge of learning. And so our vision, our view of learning, when we look at learning theory, pedagogy, when we look at the science of learning, when we look at how people learn, you are in control. We no longer talk about good teaching. We talk about facilitating or enabling learning, right? And for example, do slides help? Does the dim light help? Let's face it, right now the air conditioner is more responsible for you listening to me than me. Right? I can tell you that because on Monday, in the back, if you look on that very back, you'll see they brought in towels for me because on Monday I was melting. So, right? So we know that you are an active part of it, right? That in essence, you aren't just a blank slate. So that's number one. But there's a great thing that happens in science. We like to think we study the truth. We don't study the truth. We study the truth for now. Many people mistake that when they think of science and scientists. They say, you're in the truth business. I notice we have in the audience a minister, a priest. You, sir, are in the truth business. Thank you. I am not. There's a reason I wear a robe and not a collar at graduation. Because what scientists do through their methods, through their techniques, through their studies, is they come up with their best explanation of why something happens, some phenomenon, the stars, why atoms work the way they do, what's the best book, what's the best learning. But the key to the scientific method is that it is always falsifiable. That is, we can never say it is true. We can simply say it is the best explanation until someone changes it. The earth is flat until someone goes around it, right? That dinosaurs died because of lack of food until someone finds a huge asteroid impact, and suddenly it's different. That the earth is fixed until we find plates and they move around, right? We change this. But the truth is that as scientists, we love to pick on metaphors, even though we don't think of them as metaphors. And so as we looked at learning through the 20th century, we assumed that it worked like these books. That while you may be an active learner, and don't worry, I'm not going to mess this up, I just had to slide this in the right place. And there was one right place. And if I were to look at how you understood the world, it would look as a well-organized system. That rational perspective is what drives much of librarianship today. My New York librarian colleague of 100 years ago, Melville Dewey, felt that the world could be described in 10 categories. Right? Before him, Roger Bacon was better. He could do it in 3. Right? Library of Congress, who knows what they were thinking? They just had a full alphabet to go and kept going, right? But the idea was we could come up with one way to describe all knowledge in the world, and it would make sense, and it was rational, and it was universal, and it was logical. And then we actually looked at how people did it. And it turns out that learning doesn't look like this library. Learning looks like a network. Learning looks like the roads of Rome, which is who knows who made them up, but they're random, right? It's funny, in the United States, we always talk about Boston as having confusing roads. They have not been here. It's a network. How you understand something, what something means to you. When you learn a topic, it doesn't go in one spot, in the same spot. It goes into a network of knowledge. How you relate things together. So, for example, I look at this on the myths of Rome, which is clearly about Rome, but it's clearly about mythology. So when I have to pick a place to put it in my mind, does it go in a place about Rome, or does it go into a place about mythology? And that's going to be different than from me to you. So, learning is a network. Today, I see people going like this because that's natural, but that's not how we always thought about it. We evolved to that understanding. So if you have had to read my book, or you've heard those speeches, or you've read the blog posts, the phrase that most people have issue with is that I talk about the mission of librarians is to facilitate knowledge creation. And people go, oh, no. We're about knowledge transmission. We're about knowledge organization. People don't create knowledge, right? It's right here. I didn't make that. And yet, when you learn something, it's always a unique place in that network to you. So every time you're learning something, you are creating your knowledge. That's what that means. It doesn't mean librarians turn the world into scientists. Librarians turn the world into painters. Librarians turn the world into new things we've never discovered before. It's librarians help people learn. That's all that mission says. But we have to understand, with learning, we are not simply taking what I know and putting in you. You are not an empty bucket. You have to decide to learn. You have to absorb the information, and you have to put it in relationship to everything else you know. So if I tell you that 2 plus 2 equals 4, yes, we sort of knew that before. But for you, how does that relate to your world? Oh, I hate math. Don't tell me about math. Or, yes, that's the additive property, of course. In the United States, we have a new way of teaching children mathematics. It's called the Common Core. And what's happened is, I'm a professor. I took a class in statistics. I know what a harmonic mean is. I know what a Pearson R is. I know what a reliability variable is. My 8th grader comes home with homework. I can't help them because I can't understand it. Because they're teaching it completely different. When I learned mathematics, 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 3 equals 5. 2 plus, right? And you memorize, and you memorize, and you memorize. And I don't know about your school, but when you get it wrong, nuns, they're good at that. Anyway, so they're learning it very differently. My son, he sees numbers on a number line. When he sees 2 plus 3, he sees a mark at 3, and then in his mind, he physically moves something 3 spaces and finds 5. I can't comprehend that. Same thing, very different relationship, very different understanding. So this knowledge creation, people, oh, David, no, I'm not creative, I'm not a scientist, but you're creating knowledge. Librarianship. We've talked all week about how the world views librarians. Some say, oh, no one values a librarian. You tell them you're a librarian, they think you dust books. There's no respect. They don't know we're professionals. They don't know what we do. And I've met some librarians who internalize that. So when you say librarianship, they're like, yeah, I'm a librarian. That's how they understand the field. I talk to other librarians like, I'm a librarian, right? How do we understand it? And then, by the way, how do we shape how other people understand it? It can move. It's malleable. Nothing is fixed. If the Italian people do not know how to respect librarians, they can change. And we can change them. All right? So knowledge creation. This idea of moving from the idea of me, the teacher's teaching, to you, the learner, learning, is a shift in what we call agency. In America, what that means is who's in control? Who has the power? Okay? So for some of you around the critical theory world, feminist theory and such, who owns the power in this relationship? In learning, we moved from teacher to student. As a teacher, I can't force you to learn. You have to choose. But we see this in other areas. In medicine, we have changed the view of our relationship to a doctor. It used to be, I'm sick, I'm broken, I have a disease, I'm unhealthy. I go to a doctor, the doctor fixes me. The doctor knows everything, the doctor gives me a prescription, I go away, right? Until I break something else and I come back. That's the relationship. Whatever you say, doctor, yes, doctor, I will do that, doctor. Meanwhile, the doctor's relationship, he only sees you as a sick person. So what we know is the number one reason that people who are sick get sicker is because they don't follow the instructions of the doctor. Here's a medicine, take it every day. Every day, every other day, I'm tired, right? And they get sicker and sicker. So we've changed in healthcare from viewing medicine as treatment of disease to health. How do we keep you healthy? So it's not me give you a pill, it's say, go walk, go jog, go run. Stop eating the gelato, eat more of the vegetables. And you're in charge. How many people have something like this? So this is my smartwatch, this is a Pebble. Not Apple Watch. I don't have that much money. And it tells me how much I walk. Anyone have a pedometer? A Fitbit? Yes? All the Americans are going, yeah, and all the we're walking. What? I know, take an American. We ride, it's like we have to go 2 doors down. We drive. It's true. Right? But the idea, why do we do this? The #1 growing market in the United States and around the world is, they call the market the worried well. Well, meaning they're healthy, they're well. They're healthy, but they're worried. They want to stay well. So they track, how much do I walk? How long do I sleep? What was my exercise? Right? To stay healthy. Because we've changed. Who's in charge of you being healthy? The doctor or you? We call it patient-centered care, patient-centered management, etc. All right? In credibility, it used to be in communications. We would look at where you got your news. If you read the newspaper, you felt that was more credible. It's the newspaper. We know in early television studies, if it came on the television, we assumed it was true. Right? Reality television. Now we watch the Kardashians. I don't know why. Maybe that's an American thing too. We used to think the internet. Oh, if it's on the internet, it's true. Right? And we would talk about source credibility. Or we talk about channel credibility. And the notion was that some authority makes it credible. If the Vatican says it's true, it's true. If the President of the United States says it's true, it's true. Now I know in Italy you all trust your politicians to tell you the truth. Okay? That laugh represents a major change in our society. We used to believe that someone's position, someone's title, someone's institution gave them credibility. We no longer believe that. In fact, we believe just the opposite. The larger the institution, the greater the title, the less we trust it. Right? That's a shift. Now, who's in charge of determining if this is true or false? You are. Right? If you go, it used to be if you wanted to take an airplane ride and you went and got tickets, you would trust a travel agent. Now, you have to go buy the ticket. Whose problem is it, by the way, if the ticket is wrong? Yours. So we've also shifted responsibility. In librarianship, we're moving, and I'm going to talk about this, from an information view to a knowledge view. In other words, all this movement also is happening in our libraries. Just because you work in a library doesn't mean you're credible. Just because it's in a library doesn't mean it's information. So we have to change that view. And in librarianship, we're moving from the institution, I am part of a library, to librarianship, I build a library. This is a library not because of all the amount of dead trees around us. This is why it's a library. And all the interns who worked in this room, you're the reason this is a library. So let's talk about that. Because what I want to talk about is, all right, if I'm a librarian, what is my role in learning? What do I need to know? Well, this is how we used to think the role of a library. Notice library, building, institution, library, what its role was in learning. You have a student, and the student is coming to the library to access a resource. Yes? Simple. If that student needs any help, any instruction, any education, that comes from a teacher. And the teacher, this relationship, that is learning. So many librarians will say to me, I'm at an academic institution. We have students here. The professor's in charge of whether those students know anything. If they come get something from the library, not my problem. I'll help them find the resource, but it's the teacher's job to make that useful. It's bad context to see if it's valuable. The librarian has a role. It's to organize the resources. But that's not a learning activity. That's not a teaching activity. We'd say that's informing activity. So someone comes in and they say, I need to know about the myths of Rome. And you say, here it is. Echo. And you walk away. I'm done. You have been informed. It is no longer my problem. Right? Because that's not teaching. They may use that in their classroom, but if they're going to use that in that learning, it's the teacher's problem. Okay? Now, we can take this one step forward. We can push little baby steps forward, and we end up with here, which is no. Those resources are part of learning. So learning occurs when the learner reads the resource, when the learner gets the resource. And the librarian's job is to organize and get those resources ready. Now, any of you who've been in education may have heard the name Piaget. Piaget studied like 6 kids, but we all cite him now. French pedagogical, came up with the idea of kindergarten. And Piaget said the way in which people learn is you create a very interesting, complex environment, and you release a student into it, and when they interact with that environment, they will learn. They will play with water and learn the nature of liquids. They will play with clay and learn the nature of solids. They will move around and learn from colors and lines. This is a very Piaget model. This, by the way, is very much where most libraries are today. That librarians will say their job is to create the richest information environment for people to learn. So these books and the complexity of the books, the nature of the books, the completeness of the collection, the access to databases, all of this, even the fact that there are 2 stories and how is the room laid out, is there air conditioning, and all these things. We create a ready environment, and then we walk away. Because that's not us. We're not in charge of whether they learn. We've created a ready environment. We're not responsible. We're simply informing them. I also put under there, you'll see something called the grocery store model. There's a wonderful, wonderful librarian and consultant, Joan Fry Williams, who says that libraries need to be more like kitchens and less like grocery stores. What that means is a grocery store is where you go and get all the ingredients you need to make a meal. I need milk. I need this. I need that. And then you leave the grocery store and you go to your kitchen, and that's where you actually do the interesting stuff. So a grocery store model, Piaget's model, of a library is, I need to read that book, and I need to read that one, and I need to look at this database, and then I go to my classroom, my home, my dormitory, and that's where I do all the work. Or even if we give you a desk, that's nice of us, but that's not important. So this is where we've begun to move. The library model is one that says libraries are adjunct to learning. In other words, real learning happens with the student and the book, or happens in the classroom with the teacher. We're helpful. It's nice to have us. We make right? If we were here, then that poor professor might have to look, 3 more links down in Google to assign their papers. But we're not the learning process. So it's great that you learn, but when we come to evaluate, when we come to say a student can graduate, we don't stop in the library, we go and watch in the classroom. And we look at their grades, their transcripts of what they did in the classroom. We look at the tests they took in the classroom. In the library, that's nice to have. I'm sure maybe it helped. But you can't answer this question. Did you learn more because the library was here? If you got a B in my course, was it because the library wasn't good enough? Or without the library, would you have gotten a C? We don't answer that question. It doesn't make sense to us. How would I know that? Because we're not directly part of learning in this model. A librarian works in information. This is information. Frankly, this is information. This is information. Everything's information, right? It could be a book, it could be a video, it could be a database. As long as we have to pay for it, it's information. And this is where the world of bibliographic instruction. Do you call it bibliographic instruction? No.
I'm joking.
All right, okay. Everything's cataloging to you. All right. What do we call it?
Yes,
Bibliographic? BI. BI. I mean, what a horrible... Ugh. You sound like dirty saying it. BI. Ugh. Right? But the idea was, we come and we teach you how to use our stuff. Great! We turn you into little librarians and set you on your way, because this is important. And learners, what do we call them? We call them customers or consumers or users. It's all about them taking and taking and taking. They come in, they find their book, and they take it. They use it. Right? What a horrible thing. This may be an English thing, but in English, if you are used by another person, it is not a good thing. It is not good to be used, and it's not good to use other people. And yet that's the term we keep throwing around. How about consumer? Consumer. That's buckets. Right? It's like an American eating. Right? So consumer. So let's talk then about moving from a library to a librarian model. Let me make an argument for where we are moving and where we need to go. So first of all, we see the introduction of instruction. So now when you go to library school or when you look at job ads in the US and in Canada and other places, they're hiring instructional librarians or librarians to do instruction. We no longer call it bibliographic instruction. It's now simply instruction. And we see that, for example, in school libraries that have been doing this forever, it's called information literacy. That is, we have a curriculum. We don't just bring them in and teach them the Dewey Decimal System and send them out. We teach them how to make sense of all this information they're going to consume. Can I trust it if it's on the web? What does peer review mean? What is it in a journal or a magazine? And why can't I use my friend's comment in my paper? We see this in academic libraries around this new title of instructional librarians. And by the way, they're more and more using the term information literacy. They just decided not to pay attention to the school librarians who've been doing it for 20 years. But I digress. And in public libraries all over the world, we see this in classes and workshops. So in the United States, what happens is every Christmas, their son buys their elderly mother a Kindle or an iPad. Mom, you're going to love this. You can read lots of books. Mom, you can watch movies. Here you go. See you next Christmas. The mother then looks at it and probably quickly realizes that she needs a wireless network to make this useful at all, and realizes she has no idea what a wireless network is. And so where does she go? She's not in school. She's not part of a university. She's not part of a college. Maybe she asks her friend. Her friend looks at it and says, a wireless what? Right? And so increasingly in the States, they come to public libraries, and so every 5 days after Christmas, librarians have all these classes on how to use an iPad, how to use a Kindle. All right? So this is happening all the time. With the economic crisis in the US, and we see this in Europe, it's been how to do resumes, how to do job seeking, how to do job hunting. We do things on new materials. We have speakers come in. And so increasingly we're seeing public librarians educating their communities. They're getting into the world of instruction. And now we begin to see this model where we realize that the learners there, they're accessing resources, and the act of the librarian to organize and provide access to those resources is considered learning. In other words, we don't have to be ashamed anymore that someone actually learned from what we did, right? And we can take credit for the fact that they learned from what they did. So I had the great honor this morning of getting a tour of the Vatican Library. Thank you. Grazie. And I know that you need scholars who come in and use the manuscripts and use the books. I also believe that the scholars, if they publish a book or a paper or materials, should cite or credit the library for that happening. And the library, I'm guessing, actually acquires some of those materials. That's a beginning to say, look, we were part of scholarship. By us providing you access, connecting, collecting, preserving, digitizing. We have furthered knowledge. We have furthered learning. Let us take credit for that. That's a step. But then we have to look at what's the next step. Well, the next step is we have to realize life is a bit more complex. We have a learner, and that learner may well be working with a teacher or a colleague or another scholar. And they may access the resource. And now, they may actually talk to a librarian. How does it work? What does it happen? But notice the arrows. The arrows are now on both ends of that line. What do I mean? When a learner finds something new, some new idea, they can now teach the teacher. We know from studies that graduate students, PhD students in research, adopt the information habits of their advisors. If this is what the advisor looked at, that's what I look at. So that means at the very least, every graduate student is at least one generation behind in the tools available to do scholarship and learning. Okay? Why don't you use Google Scholar? My professor doesn't use Google Scholar. Your professor is dead, but he still doesn't use Google Scholar. Right? We need to now say, have them come in and go, have you seen Zotero? Have you seen Google Scholar? Have you seen what Web of Science is doing? And they begin to teach their advisors how this works. The resource is no longer just about consuming the resource. What about the dissertation they write? Why doesn't that go into the collection? What about the paper they write? And you say, great, Dave, good for PhD students. What about the painting the 5-year-old does in class? In the United States, sure, it doesn't happen. In Italy, your 5-year-old child paints a painting. They bring it home. Look! We put it on the refrigerator with a magnet. There are libraries that now are in essence becoming the new magnets, the new refrigerators where they're sharing that artwork out. So the 5-year-old comes home and says, Mom, look at this on an iPad. I'm in the library. And they feel good about themselves and they want to go back to the library. They want to do more and learn more and be more. And so by creating information, they're learning that people in society don't simply buy and consume. They create and they push and they challenge and they shape. If we want to create a society of scholars and students and workers who feel all they can do is buy and purchase, we have doomed society. We have created a society that simply sits on couches and waits to be told. That is the recipe for a failed society. We need to teach them that they can shape and comment and concern and learn. And remember that learner is a network. They're a network of how they understand things, how they see things. So yes, they may not write the next book, but they may build a guide to a bibliography that is totally unique. We never thought about that. Have you ever thought about where the public water fountains are in Rome and how much that leads to dehydration and death on days like today? I do. No one ever thought about that, yet now we have Google Maps and we can plot all those locations and bring that data in. And you say, oh, but David, they're not creating anything. That combination is creation. Who has a smartphone, Android or Apple? See? See? iPhone? Yes? Yes? I need a volunteer. Who has an iPhone? All right, come on. Who has an Android phone? Android? Come on. Interactivity, I know. Okay, ready? Unlock your phone. On the home screen, unlock. On the home screen, unlock.
Okay.
Okay? Unlock. On, but unlock. On, but unlock. See, all right, ready?
Okay.
Unlock. You don't trust people.
Yes, but if I wait more than 60 seconds, it's...
Well, keep pressing things. All right.
Okay.
I want you
Yes.
to put my name in your addresses. Okay, ready?
Okay.
1, 2,
Oh my God.
3.
Okay.
Okay, basta. Grazie mille, grazie. Why does that happen? Thank you. Because we don't simply use these phones, right? We don't simply use, we change them. We add apps. We add, right? So how do you use your phone? Well, I call people. Yeah, right. How do you use your phone? I play games, right? How do you use your phone? I surf the web. How do you use your phone? I kill angry birds and kill pigs, right? So you're no longer a consumer of this phone. You're no longer a user of this phone. You're a shaper of this phone. You organize this phone. See? And we know we can do that with music. We know we can do that with images. So as the Vatican puts up hundreds of thousands of documents, while they're, in the 12th century, a monk went blind and deaf and dead, copying this wonderful manuscript, we can now use it on posters for rock concerts. Now, I'm guessing the monk didn't say, oh, thank God they're going to use this for a poster. But they can. We remix, we change, we challenge. I get to use the Blue David example. Blue David! Neon David, Firenze, right? Michelangelo never said, oh, the Blue David, I think it should paint in blue. It didn't happen. But now with technology and new capabilities, this becomes something for tourists, or it becomes art, or it becomes a memory, right? We remix culture, we remix material. We don't simply consume, we add it to our network. When you see this, you may think, tacky, tourist, oh. You may think pretty. I'm going to think very hot, because it was very hot when I bought this. So in Syracuse, we have lots of snow. This is going to be in front of me all winter. I remember when I was born. Right? Network, learning. We remix, we understand. Now, reference librarians, people answer questions. All right. Then we get a question like, tell me everything about women in ancient Rome. Tell me you don't get questions like that.
We do.
Now I'm going to show you the second question and you tell me the difference. Question number 2. Tell me everything you know about women in ancient Rome. I forgot to get rid of the quote, that's not the answer. You go, Dave, there is no difference. Makiko Maiwa, wonderful doctoral student, now wonderful scholar in Japan, did a study where she looked at the questions people ask in their dissertation process. And she found out that people who are writing a dissertation ask the same question at the beginning and the same question at the end. But it's not really the same question. The question at the beginning, tell me everything you need to know about Rome, is I know nothing. Give me the world. I'm going to surf. I'm going to look. I'm going to try and make sense. This question they ask 2 days before they defend. And what they want to know is, did I miss anything? Show me everything because I want to make sure there's nothing missing. But it's the same words. Because if you are a librarian and you inform people and you're not about understanding how they learn and you don't know about knowledge, you do the same thing. Oh, this is how I answer the question. Oh, same question. This is how I answer a question. But if you look at it as learning, if you look at what they're trying to do is understand to create knowledge, you do a very different system. You search deeper. You search wider. You get their bibliography and check against it. You can offer them very different services. So when we talk, the same thing, by the way, in terms of our collections. Everything about women in ancient Rome, let's face it, that used to be, let's be honest, everything that a white male ever wrote about women in Rome. Because that's what libraries collected in the 1930s and the 1920s. And usually, everything that someone who was British and male and white wrote. Now, it's what women wrote, and it's looking at the original text, and it's looking at the book that came from the 13th century that asked that question. Right? Now we can bring more resources in because we understand the world differently. As a society, our understanding is also a network and changes. Everything is learning. Everything we do, everything we say, it is all about learning. Reference. We've moved from catalog support to searching support to targeted instruction. When reference was first envisioned in the 1800s by Sweat Green, he's looked at it and said, our catalogs are horrible and hard to use. We'll throw a librarian to answer it. And then it became, we can help you search for things. We can find things that aren't even in our own catalogs. And now, when I answer a reference question, it's actually teaching. It's a class in 1 minute or less. What do you need? What do you know? How's this going to work? Did that make sense to you? Is this going to help you? It's instruction. In information literacy, we've moved from bibliographic instruction to general information to now inquiry-driven learning. What does that mean? When someone comes in and they ask you a question, and you know that it's their passion, they need to know, we can help them not simply get information. We can help them become better people, more satisfied, more passionate about the world. What a great world to be in. When in collection development, we've moved from organizing artifacts to discovering learning objects. I can learn from this book, I can learn from that statue, I can learn from that building, and I can learn from that person. And so now our collection is much more than what we can fit into a room because it can move around on 2 legs. Or in Rome, on mopeds, very dangerously. Right? And so now we have the librarian model. Now we move to the idea of not the institution, but the person. The librarian is a facilitator, that should be an F, of learning. This was gelato in Piazza Pupolo, you're not paying attention. The librarian, you are a teacher. You're an educator. If you catalog materials, you are an educator. If you answer a reference question, you're an educator. If you chose the type of railing to put around, you have shaped someone's understanding. I'm in Rome, right? I walk into the Vatican library. It's one of those libraries where you just suddenly lose your breath. And you simultaneously feel immensely smart being there. Just by being there, you feel I'm smart. And at the same time, immensely unworthy. And they're going to find out and kick me out. They let me in. They gave me a badge. It was okay. But, right? The room itself, how we lay it out. Does it have meeting tables or carols with individual study? Do we highlight the books and materials, or are they all spine out? This is not a right or wrong answer. This is not a right or wrong answer. But it should be a choice, and we should recognize it has effect. When I walked into the old entrance, and there was quite literally the story of how a book went from production, went from materials and production, and they sold the materials, and they created the books, and they had education, so you had to learn to read them, and then there was pleasure reading. That inspires a whole new view of that activity. For a library devoted and dedicated to the history of the book and the manuscript, it is a perfect representation of a temple to the book and manuscript. People often say, Dave, you don't like books. Let's put a 3D printer in the Vatican Library. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what does your community need? What does it want? How does it work? When we walked into the reading room with manuscripts and we were told very clearly, my sons were with me, shh. Right? We're librarians, we're not supposed to do that anymore, right? Shh, that's old. But you do that when scholars are working on manuscripts, and that's intent. When you have 5-year-olds running around, that's not what you do. So your library looks different, or you separate them, or you make them different places. The library looks like the community because the librarian knows the community and can build spaces, virtual, physical collections that meet the community needs, because we know It's for learning. It's not for these things. Right? The myths of Rome. I don't get to touch it and suddenly know the contents. I have to find it. I have to engage it. I have to understand it. I have to talk to people about it. I, as the learner, am active. This is not a brick and this is not a bucket. I am a person. This is a source. Those are sources. You are sources. This is a source. They're all sources. Librarians work in knowledge. We don't inform people. We help them learn. We help them learn. Librarians, and particularly in the city, talk about how we have preserved civilization as we know it. We've preserved it from the ancient library of Alexandria and into the libraries of India, where they used these manuscripts and these scrolls and these tablets to invent algebra and zero. And they migrated to the libraries of the Iberian Muslim Peninsula, where they were used to build great new architectural works and aqueducts and new understanding. And they came through the Crusades and they renovated and rejuvenated a whole medieval learning society that happened to be in Rome and Florence, where it brought a whole new renaissance. And librarians can take credit for a good part of that. Right now, as the Taliban and as the Islamic State go to decimate historic territories and decimate collections in ancient libraries, librarians are literally risking their life to save knowledge. Now, I want to be very clear. By grabbing the books and running, they have not yet saved knowledge. If you take those books and you bury them, they're not knowledge. They're soil. It is only when they engage a human being and they learn and they read and they understand and they seek to change the world that it becomes knowledge. It's people. We're in the knowledge creation business. That doesn't mean we're in the science business, and it doesn't mean we have to have massive telescopes. It means that we change people's worlds. When they come to us, whether they come to us, whether they come to our places that we've created, whether they use our tools or our scans, and they view their world just a little differently. Maybe just a little, maybe inches, but maybe massively. Maybe it's looking at that bright light in the sky and realizing that it has things going around it, and that may mean that not everything's going around the earth, and that suddenly changes the entire universe. That comes from engagement and speaking and learning. Is the next Galileo waiting to come into your library? Is the next Galileo 5 years old? And if all they ever know of a library is, oh, it's a place that's boring and quiet, and they never come back, and so therefore they never make that discovery, is that okay? Or do we need to throw open every door we can to every person and say, come in and see, come in and know, come in and understand? Come in and see the glory not only of the past, but the potential of the future. That's what our libraries can be. Not because they're great rooms and great architecture, but because we as librarians say, come, learn. We're not going to tell you what to learn. What do you want to know? What are you passionate about? Think about as librarians, your goal is not to wait behind a desk for someone to ask you a question. Your job is to run through the streets and say, what do you want to know today? Think of it, a librarian. Your job is not to help someone who can't do something. Your job is to excite someone to do something they never knew they could do. As librarians, we are the satyrs calling these poor suckers into our libraries and opening up their universes where before they never thought that deeply before. That's what we do. And we don't have users and consumers and customers. We have members of the community. We have citizens. We have learners and makers. We have creators. We have faculty and scholars. We have students and boys and girls and parents and neighbors. We have neighbors. The people beside us every day. That's our world. And what do? We are facilitators of this knowledge creation. We help people have conversations with themselves, with materials, with scholars, with others, with whole new civilizations. We help that conversation occur. We help build knowledge because it is unique to a human. We provide environments of these rich playgrounds of the mind. We provide motivation because learning only happens in the presence when someone has a simple question they need to know. Why this shift? Because our communities need places of learning. The schools, they're too restrictive. Either by age, you've aged out, you're not allowed to go to school anymore. Or by money, you can't afford the degree, you can't go. Or some sort of structured curricula. This is what you will know, and this is the order you'll know it, and this is how it has to happen. They need us because knowledge creation is key to democracy. They need to know what's happening in the world, and they need to know what happened in the world 2,000 years ago when we tried this the last time. They need to know about technology. They need to know what their capabilities are. And continuous learning is now the key to a vibrant economy. You can't be a librarian because you learned it 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You're a librarian because you learn it every day. And by the way, a plumber. And by the way, an engineer, and a lawyer, and a doctor, and a parent. Trust me, as a parent, I learn new things every day about what it is to be a parent. Our communities need us because learning happens everywhere. But learners need a trusted guide, and learning is beyond school. I started this presentation by calling for your help. I need your help. I will end this presentation by correcting it. They, our communities, need your help. They need to be better. They need to learn. They need to look at a government that they feel is corrupt and know that it can be better. They need to see immigrant populations coming over the shores and know that they have a way of bringing them into the culture and not fighting against them. They need to know that they have a place where they mean something, where they're important, and where they can unleash the world. They need you. They need you. And you can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.